Alrighty. Hi guys. So we are going to try something slightly different today. I'm going to do a lecture without writing anything on the board. Here's why. When you get to college, you'll have some teachers, or professors rather, who will have a PowerPoint. You'll have some professors that still like to write on whiteboards. You'll have some professors who like to write on chalkboards. And then you'll have the guy that stands up in front of you and talks for 3 hours. No break, no handouts, no PowerPoints, just one mic, okay? So although I will not bore you by talking to you for the next 45 minutes or 30 minutes or anything like that, I do want us to get into the habit of learning how to take notes in various situations, sometimes from texts, sometimes from videos, sometimes from writing on the board, sometimes from PowerPoints, and today from just audio notes. Does that make sense? So I won't be doing this every time, and I realize it is helpful when I write on the board, but it's a skill we have to learn because some professors suck. All right, so moving on. I should not have said that. I'm recording. I'm going to say I didn't say suck. There it is. Okay, so let's look at our objective so that we can write our essential question. So our objective is we're going to analyze a prompt. So that is a different prompt than the future prompt. We're going to analyze a different prompt to create a thesis you can either make a compound sentence or a complex sentence for your argument essay thesis. Then you're going to create 3 rationales, 3 sentences as rationales to support this thesis. And they can also be either complex or compound sentences. And I'm going to check them by going through the checklist of what makes a good thesis or what makes a good strong thesis. So what's your rationale? Is it open or closed? Is the claim arguable? Remember when we went through that checklist? So that's what I'll be using to grade your work. That aside, okay? Now we have a thesis that tells us where our essay is going. Then we have rationales. So what our rationale is, your rationale is your reason. In a closed thesis, you put the rationales right into the thesis. In an open thesis, you don't have to put your rationales. It's a choice, okay? So remember, your closed thesis has your rationales embedded. Your open thesis is a claim with a broad or general explanation. Now, rationales are not to be confused with your evidence or your warrant, okay? Remember, evidence is your actual factual proof. Those are your stats. Those are your quotes. Those are your example of something that really happened. That's evidence. That's for tomorrow. It's not your warrant. Your warrant is explaining said evidence. That's for next week. So what is a rationale? A rationale is your reason for believing your claim. Your rationale is your reason for believing your claim. Okay? It's your argument. And when you make that argument, you want to make sure it doesn't have fallacies. When you're making your arguments, you want to make sure they don't have fallacies, falsehoods. That's what fallacy means. It means a falsehood, okay? So that's what you want to make sure isn't present. So go ahead and open up your handy dandy blue books, page 615. You don't open up your blue book. You share with her. Get no book. The person next to you doesn't have a book and or their book is holding up my camera, then share with the person next to you. If you and the person next to you don't have a blue book, then Diego, can you let Josie and Andrew borrow your book and you share with Leslie? Is that a possibility? Thank you. Okay. So we're going to get to avoiding logical fallacies. Now, logical fallacies focus on the logos. So remember, pathos is what? Anybody? Emotion. Ethos is what? Authority or credibility. Logos is what?
Logic.
So a fallacy is a flaw in your what? In your logic or your logos. Okay? It's where there is a hole in your logic. And if there is a hole in your logic, remember, an argument is like Jenga, and I am a 2-year-old. If there is a hole or an easy place where I can pull down a brick and your entire argument falls, I'm going to poke at it. So a fallacy is that little Jenga block that is halfway out that you need to tap, but instead I go, whoop, and the whole thing falls, okay? I'm a 2-year-old, and your argument is Jenga. So, post hoc, ergo, propter hoc. Ms. Miller never says that right. My Latin, sorry. So, it means after this, therefore, because of this. After this, therefore, because of this. So, if we look at the example, it says, soon after the country declared war, the divorce rate was increased. War is harmful to marriages. This ad hoc logic creates a relationship, a cause and effect relationship that may not exist. Okay? Man, I went to Ms. Miller's class and man, she hurt my head. After that, I didn't do any work for the rest of the day. Ms. Miller's class makes students not able to work. Whoa. Okay? Or, I found a penny. After I found the penny, I passed all my tests. Finding pennies makes people pass tests. Not studying, not knowledge, not preparation, finding pennies. You see how when taken to an extreme, those don't hold up. It has to be an actual provable causation. Yes, a divorce rate might increase after a war, but those two things might not be related. That's like if it rains and your mom makes meatloaf, your mom making meatloaf doesn't cause it to rain, and it raining probably doesn't affect your mother's menu choices. Both things just happen to happen on the same day. Does that make sense? So it's when you're creating a causation or a causality that doesn't really exist. In an argument, if you're going to say one thing causes another, you need to prove unequivocally, without a doubt, that that causes that. I detach my radio. I let go of my radio. My radio falls. Unequivocally. What caused my radio to fall? Letting go of it. Okay? Unequivocally. Now, if my radio doesn't work, it may be as a result of that fall. It may also be as a result of the fact that I leave it in my crate most days and it gets jumbled around and jostled around and then I forget to charge it. So it could have broken just then. But I can't unequivocally prove that because I bang my radio around a lot. Totally kidding, Miss Ruiz. I don't bang my radio around. I know it's brand new. I didn't even really drop it on the ground. It totally didn't happen. Okay, so let's go to 16. Non sequitur. Okay, these, remember when we talked about staying germane to the argument? Rationales that are non sequitur don't stay germane to the argument. They don't actually argue the point you're trying to argue. Okay? So here it has an example. The early Egyptians were masters of architecture and geometry. Thus, they created a vast network of trade and commerce throughout the ancient world. Geometry causes commerce. Now, the problem with this is not that them being good at architecture and geometry didn't help their commerce. It's that this argument doesn't show how. Does that make sense? So there essentially would need to be more words. Easier example. He said, "Not by the hair of my chinny chin chin." This proves the wolf didn't get into the house. Do those two things relate? Watch this. The pig then said, "Not by the hair of my chinny chin chin." The wolf began to huff and puff, but he could not blow the brick house down. He then tried to climb in through the, chimney, where he found a fire and was burnt to death. So, the wolf did not manage to make it into the last pig's house. Now, does it require more words? Yes, but it makes that leap between "not by the hair of my chinny chin chin" and "the wolf didn't get in" make sense. Sometimes when I ask you about your arguments in the questions on the side especially, you say, well, blah, 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 blah happened, then this, then this, then that. That's how it proves that. No, the words that came out of your mouth just proved your point, and those are the words that should have been in your essay. Does that make sense? So if I can still ask you, how does this prove this, especially those of you who still have a habit of writing in APES for essays. APES isn't for essays, it's for short answers. So if you're still writing in APES for essays, you need to add more explanation. He said blank. This proves that. Does it really prove that? Does it really? She said, how come I can't do that, Jim? This proves that Jim is older than Scout. No, it doesn't. She said, how come I can't do this, Jim? The fact that she would ask Jim for permission to do something shows that he holds more responsibility in the family, period. Generally, older siblings hold more responsibility than younger siblings. This is good proof that Jim is most likely older than Scout. See how I made that make sense? So that's how you fix that fallacy. All right, we got like 5 more. Begging the question. So begging the question is where you grant that there is an obvious need or an obvious proof in your explanation. It makes an assumption of universality. Okay? So here it says, Americans should be required to carry IDs because Americans need to be prepared to prove their identity. The conclusion assumes that Americans need to be prepared to prove their identity. It's not a universal assumption. I'm going to take a more extreme example just to show you how it works. Well, of course she should have been jailed because she had an abortion, and everyone knows abortion is wrong. Is that true? Is that universal? No, it's a poor argument because it assumes universality of belief. Begging the question assumes universality of belief. You cannot think that people believe what you believe. You have to leave room, concessions and counter-arguments, for other people to believe differently and prove that your belief is the most important. Does that make sense? The most valid. So, if we were to fix that, it would say, Americans should be required to carry ID because Americans should be prepared to prove their identity. It assists law enforcement if Americans can prove their identity because although they may be able to detain an American and eventually get proof of identity, it is more convenient for all involved, both the security forces and Americans, if all Americans are able to prove identity at the time it is requested. Okay? You see how adding what we call qualifiers to it makes it make sense. I'm not saying all Americans have to have their ID. I say the why. Why it makes it convenient. Now, do I agree with that? No. I'm American. I was born here. But can I make that argument? Absolutely. And that's what's important. Can you make the argument? Okay? Don't worry. We only have 4 more, and then I'm going to let you talk to each other. Appeal to a doubtful authority. Oh, this one's simple. If the person doesn't have ethos. Appeal to a doubtful authority means the person doesn't have ethos. Now, if we think about our own essays, where would we find an appeal to a doubtful authority in our evidence or our argument? When you're quoting who?
Yourself.
When you quote yourself. According to me, students should be allowed to eat in and out. And who are you? Oh, you're a kid. So you have no idea how the federal Title I laws work, and the fact that that's not only wrong, but it's illegal, and we'll lose our funding if you eat in and out at school during the day. That's why we don't trust kids to make federal policy right now. Okay? So, an appeal to a doubtful authority means you're just using the wrong person. Okay? Mozart believed it was all about the bass and no treble. Mozart is not an authority on Meghan Trainor. 1, because he's dead. But 2, he did classical music. Or, for example, one of my favorite arguments that I've actually heard a student say, well, you know, Lil Pump says the way the election going and the government's going, we don't even need to vote. Did you just listen to Lil Pump about your voter rights? Like, is that your authority on voter registration? Lil Pump? That is a poor argument. Okay? Please do not listen to Lil Pump for your beliefs on voter registration. Okay? The lady at the DMV at least registers more people than Lil Pump, so maybe you should listen to her. The one at line A26, her. Like, she's more of authority than Lil Pump. So it's when the person doesn't have authority. Ad hominem, okay? So it's when you make it personal. You'll see these most often in 2 places for your age group. 1 in social media and 2 in relationship arguments. 1 in social media and 2 in relationship arguments. Perfect example, okay? Guy is writing, students. So I cussed her out. You're wrong for that. But she never grades work and she smells. How does that make you right for cussing a teacher out? You can't attack the teacher's character and that make you right. Does that make sense? You don't have a right to cuss a teacher out. If you're wrong for it, you're wrong. And if your rationale is she smells, all you're doing is attacking her character. And another example. Orenthal James Simpson was convicted of armed robbery and was accused and acquitted of his wife's murder. If he were to say, hey, that guy stole bread, and the guy with bread would go, yeah, but people think you killed your wife. But there's bread in your hand. It doesn't mean that the bread in his hand is not stolen. It's called a distraction. And you'll see this very common, especially in political arguments on social media or in arguments between teenagers about relationships. Why were you talking to that girl the other day on Instagram? Well, when I asked you to go out with me, you say you're too busy for me and you don't have time. I'm trying to understand, is that why you were on Snapchat with her? Or like, are we having 2 different arguments? Because we can come back to my attention to you. That doesn't answer her question, right? But instead he attacked something she did to deflect. It shows your argument is weak and you don't really have one, so your next best thing is to attack either an author or another third party. Never attack any group or any person in your essay. It weakens your argument. It is the literary example of using your words, and someone says, wow, you're not that intelligent. You go, shut up, and hit him in the face. It's the literary example of just swinging on somebody. You smell. That doesn't make me less intelligent. It means I need a bag. Okay. Either or reasoning. Either or reasoning. So either or reasoning goes like this. You only have two choices. Okay? It presents two options when there are multiple options. It presents only two options when there are multiple options. Okay? So, what are the multiple options? If, for example, someone says, you're either with me or you're against me. Well, no, I'm with you, but right now what you're doing is dumb, so I'm against this one dumb thing. I'm not against you, but I don't care if I'm your cousin. I'm not robbing a bank with you. Like, that's... But it's an either-or argument. Either you rob a bank with me, or we're not cousins anymore. That's not how biology works, Pookie. Like, we're still going to be cousins, and I'm still going to love you, but you're going to be behind bars. And I'm snitching, because you told me your whole plan. Just letting you know. Okay? So, either or just presents two options when there are multiple options. In our realm, you see that in all the prompts. The prompts say, do people want to be free or safe? It's an either or option. There's a gray area in between. Should schools have sponsorships from corporations or not? Should they have incentives for charity work or not? Okay? They're presented to you as as fallacies so that you can find the third option. So I want you to learn this phrase, and it will save your life. In order to, so this is me teaching, stepping outside of my professorial role of lecturing. This is me being an AP teacher. So this is me AP teaching. This is not the lesson from today as not writing on the board. This is me AP teaching because you guys need to know this as an AP teacher. So, boop, not a professor anymore. For real, Miss Miller. So in order to, that's how you fix that problem. So if we go to H.L. Mencken, people want to be free or safe? No. They want to be safe in order to get their freedom. Or they want to be free in order to get their own safety. Should corporations sponsor school? Corporations should sponsor schools in order to get schools to a point where they no longer need those sponsorships. Okay? Should we have incentives for charities? Yes, we should have incentives for charities, but only in the beginning. Those incentives should be gradually taken away in order to make charitable work done for the love of the charity. Does that make sense? So if you're ever in that gray area, in order to, saves your life. Now, back to La Profesora. Now back to being Professor Miller. Not writing down the board, not being helpful. All right. Hasty generalization. Hasty generalization. I'm going to use my favorite and least favorite one. Black people like fried chicken. I can say it. You can't. It's not true. I mean, there are black people who like fried chicken. That is true. I also have several friends who dislike chicken, who are black. I also have several friends who are Mexican that like fried chicken. I have one Filipino friend who is here, and she likes fried chicken too, because humans like fried chicken, especially Americans, because fried food is tasty. So, and tempura is fried food. So, any Japanese people who like tempura chicken, like that's fried chicken. So, lots of people like fried chicken. A hasty generalization is just what it is. It's where you generalize an ideology or a group of people to, because a large majority even might feel that way. A horrible hasty generalization would be, students can't do that. Students are lazy. Students won't understand that. Students don't want to do homework. You talked to all 1,975 and said T? Really? Because I haven't. And I talk to a lot. You can't say students do anything. You can't say any group of people do anything. Which is why, I cheated. This was already written on the board. We don't use everyone, everybody, all, always, never, or everything. These create generalizations. That's why they're on the banned list. You don't use them because they create generalizations. You can't say all of anything does anything. Occasionally, yes. All blue jackets are blue. Yes, that is true. But generally, these don't work. Heck, I didn't even say you can't use these all the time. You can normally not use these, but I can't even say all of the time for this. It's a paradox. We'll get to that. Last one. False analogy. My favorite. Okay, watch. I'm gonna make a classroom full of girls. Okay. Janet, do you have on socks?
Yes.
Are you a girl?
Yes.
Girls wear socks. All right, raise your hand if you have on socks. Yes! Classroom full of girls. And I'm done. We see how false analogies don't work? The false analogies don't work. Wearing socks has nothing to do with the fact that Janet is female. It has nothing to do with her sex or gender. It doesn't matter. But to say, why are you wearing pink? Pink is for girls. Girls wear pink. Yes, and blue and green and yellow and black and turquoise and chartreuse and magenta and all manner of other colors. No color is actually for girls or boys. I use that because it's the easiest example to understand. To make the analogy that girls wear pink, therefore anyone wearing pink as a girl is damaging. In an argument to say anybody that wants an incentive for a grade or to do something is selfish, makes everybody who works a job selfish. Like, I get an incentive for teaching you guys, but I'm not selfish because there are also things that I do that are part of my job that I do for free. Does that make sense? It's also about the amount of pay. It's blah, 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 blah. There's a whole bunch of stuff into it. Make sense? So, there's that. So, that is all of our fallacies in about 20 minutes. Yay.